Oh, hey, how's it going, everybody? So, we're back for another edition of All In, where I'll pick a band and I'll listen to the entire discography and give my thoughts on it. And in case you're new here, the rules go kind of like this. The band in question must have at least 5 original studio albums. Cover albums can count, but I generally do not include acoustic or live albums unless most of the tracks are original to that form. So, in case you didn't read by the title there, this video we're going to feature Pantera. That's right. So, we have Dimebag Darrell and company, and Vinnie Paul, rest in peace, you two. You know, two brothers that we lost in the music world over the years. So, many of you might think that they started off with Cowboys from Hell, and no, that's not the case. They were actually a glam band back in the 80s, believe it or not. And I didn't know this until like a few years ago. And so their discography, it's going to span from 1983's Metal Magic all the way up to 2000's Reinventing the Steel. So they have 9 total albums in that discography. But yeah, I never knew that they were actually a hair band in the 80s. I always thought that, you know, they were strictly 90s and into 2000. But yeah, so some memories about Pantera. I've heard of them over the years, but I never really was into them until like a little later. And I remember when Reinventing the Steel came out. And it actually was getting a fair bit of like exposure on rock stations, believe it or not. I was honestly surprised. And of course, my highlight with that band is definitely getting to see them at Ozfest 2000 for sure, because that's something that, yeah, granted the Pantera name is out there touring again, but you'll never see them again with the two brothers, Vinnie Paul and Dimebag. And of course, you know, I'm sure those of you who know your rock history know what happened with Dimebag, where, you know, Pantera broke up, and then Dimebag ended up with Damage Plan, and of course, you know, the tragic death of the psychotic fan that shot him. And you know, honestly, that's a shame. It's really a shame. And I thought Damage Plan sounded good too, you know. That's just when people take it way too far, but I mean, enough on the rant about that. We'll talk about the discography. So, going back to the 80s era, so they definitely had a lot of different members back then. So we start off with Metal Magic, and they start off with the song Ride My Rocket. So I can already tell, just by reading a couple of the titles, this is like their horniest album ever. So yeah, Ride My Rocket, yeah, I can kind of tell what that means. You got It'll Be Alright, Tell Me What You Want. Yeah, Tell Me If You Want It. Another kind of horny song. Latest Lover, Biggest Part of Me. Metal Magic, title track. Widowmaker, pretty good song there. Nothing on But the Radio. Sad Lover, and then they end with Rock Out. Not Rock Out with Your Cock Out. But all in all, not a bad album. If you're in the glam bands, definitely recommend checking it out. But it's kind of like on the last video I did with Kicks. They have that one album that's kind of elusive and hard to get. These first four are kind of like that. And I gotta thank my son-in-law Zachy for getting me the files to listen to these. So yeah, I mean, not really a terrible album, but not my favorite either. So then we move on to 1984's Project of the Jungle. You know, kind of segueing from the last album, still a very glam sound to them. They start off with All Over Tonight, Out for Blood, Blue Light Turning Red, Like Fire, In Over My Head, title track Projects in the Jungle, Heavy Metal Rules, which I really liked, Only a Heartbeat Away, Killers, and they end with Taking My Life. No, I don't recommend you take your life. 988 if you feel like doing so. I don't condone suicide. But anyhow, another decent album. I would say, like, not great, but it's good. And then we move on to I Am the Night, which it's an 85, another year in a row. We start off with Hot and Heavy, another horny song. I Am the Night, Onward We Rock, which is real good. Then we have Daryl Goes to the Movies, or it's abbreviated as DGTTM. Daughters of the Queen. We flip over to side 2 and we get Down Below, which that's the first version of it. You got Come On Eyes, Right on the Edge, Valhalla, and Forever Tonight. And again, I kind of rate them 3 albums about the same. You know, I don't hate them, but I don't love them either. So then we move on to 1988's Power Metal. And this is where I feel like they started getting more into the form of metal that we know and love. It's sort of like a transitional album, if you will, because it's a mix of what the first 3 were and what like the rest of it's gonna be. So here we start off with Rock the World, and then we got the power track, we got the title track, Power Metal. Very good song. And then we got We'll Meet Again, that's kind of like, We'll Meet Again is sort of like a ballad song, and as we determined, 1987 was the year of the hair bands. It was like peak hair band year. This is just after that, so gotta have that ballad in there if you're a glam band. We got Over and Out, Proud to Be Loud, another version of Down Below with the current lead singer. Then you got Death Trap, A Hard Ride, Burn, and then you got PST 88, which it stands for Pussy Time. So definitely ending that era with a horny song. So then they actually get a record deal and they get their big break. So then we move on to the 90s. So 1990s Cowboy from Hell. This is where they get like real thrashy and just get the fuck out of my way type of metal. So here we start off with the title track Cowboys from Hell. Damn good tune. Primal Concrete Sledge, Psycho Holiday, Hearsay, and definitely I would say their most popular song off of this one, Cemetery Gates. Really good song. I love Domination too. You got Shattered, Clash with Reality, Medicine Man, Message in Blood, The Sleep, and we end it with The Art of Shredding. And yeah, definitely a departure from what they used to be. Just all out thrash. They just don't give a fuck. So moving on to, I would say, the sophomore album of this era, we got Vulgar Display of Power. So we start off with Mouth for War, what a great way to start it. A New Level, and then I would say the most popular song of this album, Walk, followed by Fucking Hostile, and then This Love, which This Love kind of has a little bit of a ballad feel to it, but not quite. It's kind of like a slower song. You got Rise, No Good, Attacking the Radical, Live in a Hole, Regular People, Conflict, By Demons By Driven, and then it kind of ends with a slower song called Hollow. And yeah, a great way to follow up Cowboys from Hell. Definitely another good one here. So then 1994 rolls around. We have Far Beyond Driven. And of course they're sticking to that form. They're sticking to the same form they've had the last 2 albums. So Strength Beyond Strength, Becoming, the popular track off of this, 5 Minutes Alone. Then you have Unbroken. And then Good Friends and the Bottle of Pills. Hardlines, Sunken Cheeks, Slaughtered, 25 Years, Shredding Skin, Use My Third Arm, Trios of Rejection. And then, kind of oddly, they end it with a cover of Planet Caravan by Black Sabbath. So, first time hearing a cover from these guys throughout this whole lineup. And then the Japanese version has a song called The Badge, which is a Poison Idea cover. And that song actually was part of the Clerks soundtrack? Yeah, I had to do a little quick research there. It was from the Crow soundtrack. So yeah, definitely a great cover. So then we move on to 1996, and we got the Great Southern Trendkill. So here we start off with the title track. Then we got War Nerve, which, yeah, the version of this song, fuck the world for all it's worth. It's a pretty good song. And then the really popular track off of this, Drag the Waters. Love that song. Then you got Tens, 13 Steps to Nowhere. You got Suicide Notes, Parts 1 and 2. Living Through Me, Hell's Wrath. Floods, which is kind of like a real slow song. Then you got The Underground in America. And then we end it with Reprise, Sandblasted Skin. And then they take about a 4-year break from the studio. And then in 2000, starting off the 2000s, we have this album right here. And this is about where I started to really get into listening to them. I kind of like started off on this album and I stepped back. So here in 2000, Reinventing the Steel, we have Hellbound, followed by Goddamn Electric, Yesterday Don't Mean Shit, You've Gotta Belong to It, Revolution Is My Name, which is like the single to this one. You got Death Rattle, We'll Grind That Axe for a Long Time, Uplift, It Makes Them Disappear, and we end up with I'll Cast a Shadow. And all in all, a good solid album. And I did get to see them at Ozfest 2000 in amongst like other bands like, of course, Ozzy, Godsmack, Disturbed. They were basically thrown in with like a ton of new metal acts at the time, but I think they put on a better show than Ozzy did, to be honest with you. Like, they had a bigger crowd than Ozzy did. They were like the second to last band on the main stage. But yeah, I can actually say I got the opportunity to see them before we lost Vinnie Paul and Dimebag. It's honestly a shame that we lost them, you know. But yeah, so they did a few extra tracks on top of this right around this recording session. So they did a cover of Hole in the Sky by Black Sabbath, which apparently on Japanese versions of this album, that's on there. And then I think it was included on a couple soundtracks, but I also got to give honorary mentions to all these soundtracks for having, you know, various Pantera songs from this time. So we got Nativity in Black, which is all Sabbath covers, and Pantera did a version of Electric Funeral on this. We have the Heavy Metal 2000 soundtrack, and Pantera did Immortally Insane on this soundtrack. And then we have Detroit Rock City, which came out in '99. They did a cover of Ted Nugent's Cat Scratch Fever. And this actually released right before Reinventing the Steel did. So this was out, you know, before the album. And then we also have Dracula 2000. It kind of a little side tangent. Why, like, in around that time, why did they put 2000 after the name of everything, you know? I'm kind of noticing that here. But anyhow, we have Pantera with Void to Light on this soundtrack. So, yep, had to give honorary mentions to all them soundtracks. But that was the last of their studio stuff. And then Pantera, they ended up breaking up in around '03. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, Dimebag got with Damage Plan, and that's when the crazed fan shot him at the show and killed him, unfortunately. And then years go by, and Pantera was pretty much like, you know, like they weren't around. They just stopped. So then we end up with Pantera coming back. I think was it in 2022? I'll have to do my wiki search here. Yeah, 2022 is when they just came back. So they get Zakk Wylde. They get him in there, and then they also get it was one of the former members of Anthrax as a drummer. Yeah, it was Charlie Benante. He was with Anthrax. He was a drummer. So I almost feel like Pantera now, as they tour, that to me it's almost more of a supergroup than an original band, you know. But I mean, it's kind of cool that they're paying tribute to the brothers who are now deceased. It's a shame too, because I mean, Pantera was just one of those bands that just stuck out. Like, they were just, like, nobody could match them. And I almost feel like they could, like, you know how you have the big four in metal? These guys could have been, like, the big five. That's kind of how I feel about them. But getting to the end of it here. So I'm going to rank my favorites and my least favorites. And here we're going to kind of split it off in two eras. So we're going to do the 80s era of Pantera, like their glam era. And so there we got 4 albums, and hands down, Power Metal is my favorite from that era. And I guess it's because they were kind of segueing into how we know them now. They were kind of a blend of the hairband era, but yet the hardcore era too. They were sort of in that transitional period, and right before getting signed. Now, moving into like 90s and 2000 Pantera. Oh boy, this is gonna be a toughie. I feel like Cowboys from Hell and Vulgar. I feel like Cowboys from Hell and Vulgar Display of Power sort of ties it up a little bit. They're very close. So I'm gonna say a tie between them two albums. Least favorite? Oh man, that's a tough choice too. But I'm gonna have to go with Far Beyond Driven on that one. But nah, I don't hate the albums either. But yeah, it's just it's crazy how like it's almost like they hide like their 80s stuff. Like you can't download their 80s stuff, and if you find it on CD, it's a little pricey. I don't even think you can stream it either. I mean, but the only thing you can do there if you don't have the CDs is listen to them on YouTube, which I highly recommend you do. But it's definitely an era of Pantera that I feel doesn't get enough love. And of course, from like the 90s on, yeah, they definitely got the credit that they deserve. And considering that like grunge took over, they definitely survived it for sure. That's what's unique about them. But yeah, All In Pantera, love it. So yeah, so next All In, we're going to move on to a band that has put out a lot of material, but they didn't get popular till like the later 2000s. But yeah, you'll know who it is next time.